The ultrasound gel was cold against my skin, sending a shiver through my entire body as Dr. Pimentel spread it across my abdomen with practiced efficiency. I stared at the ceiling tiles of the private clinic, counting the small perforations in each square panel to distract myself from the flutter of anxiety in my chest. 8 weeks, I'd calculated. 8 weeks since my last period. 8 weeks of secret morning nausea that I'd hidden from Levi by claiming a mild stomach flu. The examination room smelled of antiseptic and the faint lavender from the diffuser on the counter. Through the walls, I could hear the muffled voices of nurses discussing appointment schedules, their words blending into white noise. My fingers gripped the edge of the padded table, the vinyl cool beneath my palms despite the warmth of the room. "Just relax, Mrs. Franco," Dr. Pimentel said, her voice professionally soothing as she adjusted the ultrasound wand. The monitor beside her flickered to life, displaying grainy black and white images that meant nothing to my untrained eye. I'd chosen this clinic specifically because it was on the opposite side of Milan from Levi's territory. Here, in this upscale medical center with its marble floors and designer furniture, no one would know me as the wife of the most feared man in the city. No one would recognize the surname that made business owners pale and politicians stumble over their words. The wand pressed against different points on my abdomen as Dr. Pimentel moved it methodically, her eyes fixed on the screen. I watched her face for any sign of what she was seeing, searching for the reassurance that everything was normal, that this tiny life inside me was healthy and thriving. "There," she murmured, pointing to a small flickering shape on the monitor. "That's the heartbeat." My own heart seemed to stop for a moment before resuming with a fierce intensity that made my chest ache. A heartbeat. My baby's heartbeat. The reality of it crashed over me like a wave. I was going to be a mother. Levi was going to be a father. Except something in Dr. Pimentel's expression made me pause. Her professional smile had frozen, replaced by a tension that tightened the corners of her mouth. She stared at the screen, then at her computer, then back at the screen, her fingers moving across the keyboard with increasing urgency. "Is something wrong?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken fears. Dr. Pimentel didn't answer immediately. Instead, she saved several images from the ultrasound, her movements precise but hurried. Then she turned to me, and what I saw in her eyes made my blood run cold. Not concern for the baby's health, but something else entirely. Something that looked disturbingly like fear. "Mrs. Franco," she said carefully, glancing toward the closed door as if worried someone might be listening. "Your husband's full name is Levi Franco, of the Franco family?" The way she said it, the Franco family, sent ice down my spine. Everyone in Milan knew that name. Everyone knew what it meant. I nodded slowly, watching as the color drained from her face. She rolled her chair closer to me, lowering her voice to barely more than a whisper. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Have you had any other intimate partners in the last 3 months?" The question struck me like a physical blow. "What? No, never. I would never. Why would you ask me that?" Dr. Pimentel's hands were shaking slightly as she pulled up something on her computer. "Because, Mrs. Franco, according to the medical records I have access to through our hospital network, your husband underwent a vasectomy 4 years ago. The procedure was performed at San Raffaele Hospital by Dr. Moretti, one of the best urologists in Italy." The room tilted around me. The words made no sense, jumbling together in my mind without forming any coherent meaning. Vasectomy. 4 years ago. 4 years ago, Levi and I had been dating for only 6 months. We weren't even engaged yet. "That's impossible," I managed to say, my throat tight. "We've been trying for a baby. He knows I want children. Why would he—" "Mrs. Franco." Dr. Pimentel's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts with surgical precision. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. The medical records are very clear. The procedure was successful. Your husband is sterile." I looked at the monitor, at the small, flickering heartbeat that was undeniably real, undeniably alive inside me. "But I'm pregnant. You can see it right there. How is that possible if—" "It's not," she said flatly. Then her expression softened, with something that looked like pity. "Which means either those medical records are wrong, which seems highly unlikely given the source, or—" She trailed off, letting me fill in the terrible implication. My mind raced through the last 8 weeks, trying to understand. I hadn't been with anyone else. I hadn't even looked at another man since the day Levi had walked into my father's restaurant 3 years ago. All dangerous charm and eyes that saw too much. From that first moment, there had been only him. But if he'd had a vasectomy before we were even engaged— "Why?" I whispered, more to myself than to her. "Why would he do that, and never tell me?" Dr. Pimentel stood abruptly, crossing to the door and checking that it was fully closed before returning to my side. When she spoke again, her voice was urgent, almost pleading. "Mrs. Franco, I shouldn't be telling you this. If anyone knew I had accessed these records, shown them to you. But I have a daughter your age, and if she were in your position, I would want someone to warn her." "Warn me about what?" She took a deep breath. "Men in your husband's profession. They operate by very specific codes. Loyalty, above all else. And infidelity." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Infidelity is considered the ultimate betrayal, especially from a wife." The full weight of what she was saying settled over me like a suffocating blanket. Levi would see this pregnancy as proof of my unfaithfulness. He would never believe that I hadn't been with someone else. And what men like Levi did to people who betrayed them. "I need to see those records," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need proof." Dr. Pimentel hesitated for only a moment before turning her computer screen toward me. There it was, in clinical black and white. Levi Franco, vasectomy performed August 15, 2022. Post-operative examination confirmed complete success. No viable sperm count detected. August 15, 2022. 6 months into our relationship. 6 months before he proposed to me with a diamond ring that cost more than my father's restaurant made in a year. 6 months before he'd held my face in his hands and promised me forever. Promised me a family. Promised me everything I'd ever wanted. "There's no reversal on record?" I asked desperately, clinging to any possible explanation. "No. And even if he had one done privately, somewhere not in the system, the success rate for reversal after 4 years is—" She shook her head. "It would be noted in his records if he was trying for that. There's nothing." I closed my eyes, trying to slow my breathing, trying to think clearly through the panic that was beginning to claw at my throat. Levi had married me knowing he could never give me children. Knowing that I desperately wanted to be a mother, I'd told him on our 3rd date, when he'd asked about my dreams for the future. I'd told him I wanted a big family, wanted to fill a house with laughter and chaos and love. And he'd smiled, pulled me closer and said, "Then that's what we'll have, amore mio." A lie. All of it. A lie. "Mrs. Franco." Dr. Pimentel's hand on my arm pulled me back to the present. "You need to leave. Tonight, if possible. I've seen what happens to women in your position when men like your husband discover. When they believe." "I didn't do anything wrong," I said, my voice breaking. "I've never even looked at another man." "I believe you," she said softly. "But will he?" The question hung in the air between us, unanswerable and terrible. I thought of Levi's hands, so gentle when they touched my face, so capable of unspeakable violence. I thought of the whispered stories I'd heard from other wives in our social circle, the warnings delivered behind carefully neutral expressions. I thought of the man who had disappeared last month after someone suggested he'd been too friendly with Levi's cousin's wife. "I have nowhere to go," I whispered. "My family. They're terrified of him, and his men watch me everywhere. I can't even go to the market without someone following me." Dr. Pimentel was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out a prescription pad and wrote something quickly, tearing off the page and pressing it into my hand. "This is my sister's address. She lives in Switzerland, in a small town near Lugano. She runs a bed and breakfast. If you can get across the border, she'll help you. She's helped other women in your situation before." I stared at the address, the ink already smudging from my trembling fingers. Switzerland. It might as well have been the moon for all the chance I had of reaching it. Levi's men were everywhere. His influence extended across every border, every jurisdiction. But as I looked at the monitor one more time, at that tiny flickering heartbeat that was wholly innocent of the nightmare it had been born into, I knew I had to try. This child deserved a chance at life, deserved a mother who would fight for them, deserved to exist without the shadow of their father's rage hanging over them. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady with a determination I didn't entirely feel. "Thank you for telling me." Dr. Pimentel helped me clean the gel from my skin, her movements gentle. "Be careful, Mrs. Franco. Men like your husband, they don't let go easily, and they never forget." I knew. God help me, I knew exactly what Levi Franco was capable of. I just never imagined I would be on the receiving end of it. As I left the clinic, stepping out into the cold Milan afternoon, I could already see one of Levi's men leaning against a black sedan across the street. Always watching. Always there. I had 8 months to figure out how to disappear. 8 months before this baby was born, and Levi's impossible heir became undeniable proof of a betrayal I had never committed. The countdown had begun. I made it 3 blocks from the clinic before I had to stop, pressing my hand against the rough brick wall of a pasticceria to steady myself. The sweet scent of fresh cornetti drifted from inside, and my stomach lurched, not from morning sickness this time, but from pure fear that sat in my gut like a stone. Through the bakery's window, I could see the black sedan from the clinic creeping along the street, maintaining its distance, but never losing sight of me. Dante, probably, or maybe Alessio. It didn't matter which of Levi's men had drawn surveillance duty today. They all reported back to him with the same meticulous detail. Where she went, who she spoke to, how long she stayed. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, staring at Levi's name at the top of my recent calls. 3 years of marriage, and I could count on one hand the number of days he hadn't called me by noon. It was 1:47 now. Any minute, his name would light up my screen, and I would have to pretend everything was normal. Pretend I hadn't just discovered my entire marriage was built on a lie. Pretend I wasn't carrying an impossible child that would sign my death warrant the moment he learned of it. The phone buzzed in my palm, and I nearly dropped it. But it wasn't Levi. It was Root, my only real friend in this gilded prison of a life. "Mara, where are you? Levi's assistant just called asking if you were with me." My heart rate spiked. "What did you tell them?" "That I hadn't seen you today." Root's voice dropped lower. "What's going on? You sound strange." I glanced at the sedan, now stopped at the corner, engine still running. "Can you meet me? The cafe near your gallery. The one with the blue awning. Give me 20 minutes. The cafe was small enough to feel intimate, but busy enough that one of Levi's men wouldn't follow me inside without being obvious. I chose a table in the back corner, where I could see both the entrance and the street through the large front windows. The espresso I ordered sat untouched in front of me, growing cold as I waited. Root arrived exactly 21 minutes later, sliding into the chair across from me with the graceful efficiency of someone who'd spent years navigating Milan's social hierarchies. She was the only person from my old life, before Levi, who'd been brave enough to remain my friend after the wedding. Everyone else had quietly distanced themselves, intimidated by the Franco name and all it represented. "Okay, you're scaring me," she said, studying my face. "What happened?" I leaned forward, keeping my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm pregnant." Her eyes widened, and genuine joy flashed across her features. "Mara, that's wonderful. You've wanted this for so long. Does Levi know?" "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "And he can't. Ever." Ruth's smile faded. "What are you talking about?" I told her everything. Dr. Pimentel's discovery, the medical records, the vasectomy that Levi had hidden from me for years. Ruth's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, horror, before settling on the same terrible understanding that had been growing in my chest since I'd left the clinic. "Mara," she breathed, "you have to leave. Tonight. Right now." "With what money? He controls everything. The apartment is in his name. The car is registered to his company. I have a credit card that he monitors." I laughed, a brittle sound that didn't reach my eyes. "I have exactly 200 euros in cash that I've been saving from the household allowance he gives me. That won't even get me out of Italy." Root reached across the table, gripping my hands. "Then we'll figure something out. I have some money saved. Not much, but enough to get you somewhere safe while we..." "While we what?" I pulled my hands back, wrapping them around the cold espresso cup. "Root, you don't understand what he is, what his family is. They have connections everywhere. Police, government officials, customs agents. The moment I disappear, they'll mobilize an entire network to find me. And when they do..." I didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew the stories. Both knew what happened to people who crossed the Franco family. Root was quiet for a long moment, her artistic mind clearly racing through possibilities. "The baby," she finally said. "You're sure it's his?" "I've never been with anyone else. Not once. Not even close." The words came out fierce, defensive. But he won't believe that. How could he, when his medical records say it's impossible? Then there has to be an explanation. Maybe the vasectomy failed. Maybe he had it reversed and doesn't remember. Maybe doesn't matter. I cut her off, my voice dropping even lower as a waitress passed our table. "All that matters is what Levi will believe when he finds out, and what he'll do." Through the window, I watched the black sedan pull up across the street. A different man got out this time. Alessio, confirmed. He leaned against the car, arms crossed, making no attempt to hide his presence. A message. "I see you. I'm always watching." Root followed my gaze, her jaw tightening. "How do you live like this?" "I didn't know I was living like this," I admitted. "I thought the protection, the security, the constant presence of his men, I thought it was to keep me safe, to protect me from his enemies." I laughed again, that same broken sound. I never realized I was the one who needed protection from him. Did he ever? Root hesitated. "Has he ever hurt you?" "No, never." And that was the truth. Levi had been nothing but gentle with me, attentive, even tender. He'd never raised his voice in anger, never lifted a hand against me. The violence that others whispered about, the ruthlessness that had built his empire, I'd only ever seen hints of it, shadows that disappeared when he looked at me. Or so I'd thought. "Maybe that's why this is so hard to process," I continued. "Because he's been everything I thought I wanted, protective, generous. He looks at me like I'm the most precious thing in his world. And all of it was based on a lie." Root's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and I saw her face pale. "It's Lorenzo. Levi's asking him if he's seen you." Lorenzo, Root's boyfriend, who worked in city planning. who'd been very helpful to Levi's construction projects over the past year. Who would absolutely tell Levi anything he wanted to know if it meant staying in his good graces. "You need to answer," I said. "Tell him you just met me for coffee. Tell him everything seems normal." "Mara, do it. Please. I can't have him suspicious. Not yet. Not until I figure out what to do." Root typed out a response, her hands shaking slightly. When she put the phone down, her eyes were bright with tears. "I hate this. I hate that you're trapped like this. I hate that I can't just fix this somehow. You're helping by being here, by knowing the truth, by being someone I can trust." We sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. Around us, life continued normally. Tourists debating which pastry to order, businessmen conducting meetings over cappuccino, students hunched over laptops. None of them knew that at this small corner table, a woman was trying to figure out how to escape her own life. Finally, Root spoke. "The address Dr. Pimentel gave you, in Switzerland. Do you still have it?" I nodded, pulling the crumpled prescription paper from my purse. "Then that's where you need to go. Not today, not tomorrow. That would be too obvious. But soon. We need a plan that won't immediately trigger suspicion." "How?" "He tracks my phone. His men follow me everywhere. I can't even go to the supermarket alone." Root's eyes took on a determined glint, the same expression she got when facing down a difficult art installation. "Then we make the surveillance work for us. We establish a pattern. Something routine. Something boring. Something his men would expect." "Like what?" "Like doctor's appointments." She leaned forward, warming to her plan. "You're pregnant. You need prenatal care. Weekly appointments, maybe more as you progress. Eventually, his men will get used to waiting outside medical buildings. They'll get bored, and bored men get sloppy." I wanted to feel hope, but all I felt was exhaustion. That gives us what, maybe 7 months before I start showing enough that hiding it becomes impossible? 7 months to plan an escape that probably won't work anyway? 7 months is better than no months. Root reached for my hands again, and this time I let her take them. "You're the strongest person I know, Mara. You left your father's restaurant to marry a man everyone warned you about because you saw something in him worth loving. That took courage. This will take more courage, but I know you have it." Through the window, Alessio's phone rang. I watched him answer it, his posture straightening. Then he looked directly at the cafe, and even from this distance, I could see his expression change. "He's coming," I said, my voice flat. "Levi's coming here." Root's grip on my hands tightened. "Then we act normal. We're just two friends having coffee. That's all." But my heart was hammering against my ribs, and when Levi's black Maserati pulled up behind the sedan 3 minutes later, I felt every muscle in my body tense with primitive fear. He stepped out of the car looking exactly like what he was. Power wrapped in an expensive suit. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his movements economical and precise. Even from inside the cafe, I could see the way other pedestrians unconsciously gave him space, some ancient instinct warning them away from a predator. When his eyes found me through the window, I saw his expression soften. That smile, the one he reserved only for me, transformed his face from intimidating to devastating. He raised his hand in a small wave, and my traitorous heart still skipped a beat at the sight. Because this was the man I'd fallen in love with. The man who'd courted me with poetry and roses, who'd learned my favorite songs just to play them for me, who'd held me through my father's funeral and whispered that I'd never be alone again. The man who'd lied to me about the most fundamental thing I'd ever asked for. He pushed open the cafe door, and I forced myself to smile back. "Amore mio," he said, crossing to our table. His hand cupped the back of my neck in a gesture that looked affectionate, but felt like a collar. "I was worried when I couldn't reach you." My phone was on silent. I lied smoothly. Root and I were catching up. He looked at Root, his smile remaining pleasant. How fortunate I found you both. I've been meaning to ask Lorenzo about the permits for the Riverside project. The subtext was clear. I know everything about your life, too. I should go, Root said, standing. But she looked at me, and in her eyes I saw a promise. We'll figure this out. After she left, Levi slid into her vacated chair, his knee touching mine under the table. You look pale. Are you feeling all right? The concern in his voice sounded genuine. But then, everything about him had sounded genuine until 3 hours ago. Just tired, I said. I haven't been sleeping well. His thumb traced my cheekbone with infinite gentleness. Then let's go home. I'll cancel my afternoon meetings. We can spend the rest of the day together. Home. Our penthouse apartment with its panoramic views of Milan and its locked doors that only his key could open. The beautiful cage he'd built for me. That sounds perfect, I said, and meant none of it. As Levi helped me into his car, his hand protective at my lower back, I caught Alessio's eye. The guard gave an almost imperceptible nod. Message received, target secured, everything under control. And as we drove through the Milan streets, Levi's hand wrapped around mine, I made a decision. I would play the perfect wife for as long as necessary. I would smile and pretend and plan in secret, because inside me, protected by my own body, was a life that depended on my survival. I had 7 months to find a way out. The countdown was still ticking. 3 weeks passed in a careful choreography of deception. I became an actress in my own life, performing the role of devoted wife with an attention to detail that would have impressed any casting director. Each morning, I woke to Levi's gentle kiss on my forehead before he left for whatever business required his attention. Each evening, I welcomed him home with dinner prepared exactly how he liked it, listened to carefully edited versions of his day, and curled against him in bed as though nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I'd made an appointment with a different obstetrician, Dr. Cohen, whose clinic was 3 neighborhoods away, and whose discretion Root had personally vouched for. I'd told Levi I was seeing a specialist for the chronic headaches I'd been faking, explaining that the appointments might be weekly. He'd insisted on sending Dante to drive me, of course, but I'd successfully established the pattern Root had suggested. Dante now waited in the car, bored, while I supposedly received treatment inside. Dr. Cohen, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and steady hands, had confirmed what Dr. Pimentel had shown me. I was pregnant, healthy, nearly 12 weeks along now. And according to Levi Franco's medical records, which Dr. Cohen had reluctantly accessed after I'd explained my situation, carrying an impossible child. I need you to understand something, Dr. Cohen had said during my 3rd visit, her voice low and serious. If you're planning what I think you're planning, timing is everything. First trimester miscarriages are tragically common. If you disappear now, he might believe that's what happened, that you lost the pregnancy and needed time to grieve privately. But if you wait much longer. She hadn't needed to finish the sentence. Once I was showing, once the pregnancy was undeniable, there would be no explanation Levi would accept, except the one that condemned me. I'd started gathering resources in secret. 200 euros had become 500 through careful skimming of the household money Levi provided. I'd discovered that Levi kept an emergency cash reserve in a hidden safe behind a painting in his study. 50,000 euros that he likely wouldn't miss immediately. The combination was our wedding anniversary, because apparently even Levi Franco was predictable in some ways. Root had opened a bank account in her name that I could access, depositing small amounts each week that wouldn't raise red flags. Lorenzo, oblivious to our planning, had mentioned that his company was sending him to a conference in Zurich next month. Zurich was 90 kilometers from the Swiss town where Dr. Pimentel's sister ran her bed and breakfast. 90 kilometers might as well have been 9,000, but it was a direction, a possibility. I'd also started paying attention to patterns I'd previously ignored. Thursday afternoons, Levi had a standing meeting with his accountants that always ran long. The security detail around our building rotated shifts at 6 p.m., creating a 10-minute window when coverage was thinnest. The garage beneath our apartment complex had an exit that led to a service alley, rarely used but never locked. Small details, fragments of information. The pieces of an escape plan that felt simultaneously essential and utterly inadequate. Tonight was Thursday. Levi had left 2 hours ago for his accounting meeting, kissing me with the same tender attention he always showed. "Don't wait up, amore mio," he'd murmured against my hair. "This will take hours." DeRosa is being his usual meticulous self about the quarterly reports. I'd smiled and promised to leave dinner in the warming drawer, and then I'd waited exactly 15 minutes before slipping into his study. The painting was a Caravaggio reproduction, David with the head of Goliath, appropriately violent for a man like Levi. I lifted it carefully off its hooks, revealing the modern safe behind it. My fingers trembled as I entered our wedding date, 08/15/2023. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside, neatly stacked, were the bundles of euros I'd glimpsed before. But beneath the money, I found something I hadn't expected. A folder. Manila. Unmarked, containing what looked like medical documents. I shouldn't have looked. Every instinct screamed at me to take the money and leave. But my hands were already opening the folder, my eyes already scanning the pages. The first document was Levi's vasectomy record from 2022. I'd seen this before, or at least Dr. Pimentel's version of it. But beneath it was another document, dated 6 months later. Vasectomy reversal. Performed by Dr. Moretti at San Rafael Hospital, February 12th, 2023. My hands shook so violently that I nearly dropped the papers. February 12th, 2023. 6 months before our wedding. The procedure was marked successful, with a note about recommended wait time before attempting conception. I flipped through more pages. Post-operative examinations, sperm count analyses showing gradual improvement. A final report dated May 2023. Reversal successful. Patient cleared to attempt conception. Prognosis for fertility. Excellent. The folder slipped from my numb fingers, papers scattering across Levi's desk. He'd had the vasectomy reversed. He could have children. The pregnancy wasn't impossible. I hadn't betrayed him. Our baby was his. Relief crashed over me so intensely that I had to grip the edge of the desk to stay upright. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't somehow forgotten an affair that never happened. The medical impossibility that had condemned me was a lie. Or rather, it was outdated information that Dr. Pimentel had accessed without knowing about the reversal. But then a colder realization crept in, freezing the relief before it could fully form. Levi had never told me about the vasectomy. He'd never told me about the reversal. He'd kept both secrets. Let me believe we were simply having trouble conceiving naturally. Let me spiral into anxiety about my own fertility. Why? I gathered the papers with shaking hands, trying to put them back in the order I'd found them. That's when I saw the final document at the bottom of the folder. A letter, handwritten in Italian, dated 1 week before our wedding. My Italian had improved significantly since marrying Levi, but I still struggled with some words. I grabbed my phone, translating as I read. "My dearest Levi, I understand your decision regarding the medical procedure, though it pains me that you felt it necessary. Your father's legacy weighs heavily on all of us, and I cannot fault you for wanting to avoid the curse that plagued him. However, I am pleased that you have reconsidered, that you are willing to risk your health for the possibility of an heir. Dr. Moretti assures me the reversal was successful, and that your chances of fathering a child are excellent. But I must ask you again, are you certain you wish to keep this from Mara? She strikes me as a woman who values honesty, and this deception, even with the best intentions, may wound her deeply if discovered. I pray you are right about her love, that it will be sufficient to overcome any hurt she may feel. And I pray even more fervently that the universe grants you the family you desire, without the suffering your father endured. With all my love. Mama. The letter was dated August 8th, 2023. 1 week before our wedding. 1 week before Levi had promised me forever while hiding the truth about his own body, his own capacity for fatherhood, his own fears. The curse that plagued his father. What did that mean? I heard footsteps in the hallway. The security guard's hourly patrol. Panic flooded through me. I shoved the papers back into the folder, placed it beneath the money exactly as I'd found it, and closed the safe. The painting went back on its hooks just as the footsteps passed the study door. I waited in the darkness of Levi's study, my heart hammering, questions multiplying faster than I could process them. When the footsteps faded, I slipped out and returned to our bedroom on shaking legs. The medical records changed everything and nothing simultaneously. I wasn't carrying an impossible child conceived through betrayal, but I was carrying a child whose father had built our entire marriage on strategic omissions and careful lies. Why hadn't he told me about the vasectomy, about the reversal? What curse had his father suffered that made Levi fear fatherhood enough to make himself sterile, yet desperate enough for an heir to undo it? I pressed my hand against my abdomen, feeling the slight swell that was just beginning to show. 12 weeks. In another week or two, I wouldn't be able to hide it anymore. I could tell Levi now. Show him the folder I'd found. Explain that the pregnancy was his. That I'd never betrayed him. That his child was growing inside me exactly as he'd apparently hoped when he had the reversal. But something stopped me. Some instinct that whispered that this was bigger than a simple misunderstanding. That the secrets Levi kept had reasons I didn't yet understand. His mother's letter mentioned his father's legacy, a curse, suffering. I knew almost nothing about Levi's family history. He never spoke of his father, who had died when Levi was young. His mother lived in Sicily and rarely visited Milan. The few times I'd met her, she'd been warm but distant, as if afraid to get too close. I pulled out my laptop, suddenly desperate for information I'd never thought to seek before. I typed Franco family Milan history into the search engine, filtering for older articles. Most of what I found were recent business announcements or society page mentions. But buried in the archives of a local newspaper from 2005, I found an obituary that made my blood run cold. Giovanni Franco, patriarch of the Franco family, died yesterday at age 47 from complications related to early-onset dementia. He is survived by his wife, Rosa, and his son, Levi, age 15. Mr. Franco had been diagnosed with a rare hereditary form of dementia 3 years ago, a condition that gradually robbed him of his memory, his personality, and ultimately his life. The disease, which runs in the Franco family line and affects primarily male descendants, typically manifests in the early 40s. Mr. Franco's own father succumbed to the same condition at age 45. I read the article 3 times, each word settling into my understanding like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known I was solving. Levi's father had died of hereditary dementia, a curse that ran in the male line of his family, a curse that Levi, now 33, would potentially face in less than a decade. He'd made himself sterile because he didn't want to pass the disease to a son. He'd reversed it because... why? For an heir? For me? Had his desire for a family outweighed his fear of condemning his child to the same fate? And had he kept it secret because he thought I wouldn't marry him if I knew? That I wouldn't love him if I understood the future that likely awaited him? I heard the apartment door open downstairs. Levi, home earlier than expected. I closed the laptop and hurried to the bathroom, splashing water on my face to hide the evidence of tears I hadn't realized I'd shed. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized. Pale, exhausted, carrying secrets that grew heavier with each revelation. "Mara?" Levi's voice called from our bedroom. I took a deep breath and opened the bathroom door, forcing a smile. "You're home early." He crossed to me immediately, concern evident in his eyes as he studied my face. "DeRosa finished faster than expected." His hand cupped my cheek. "You've been crying. What's wrong?" For one wild moment, I considered telling him everything. About the pregnancy, about what I'd found in his safe, about the month of fear and planning and lies that had nearly destroyed me. But his hand was warm against my face, and his eyes held such genuine worry, and beneath it all I could see shadows I'd never noticed before. The shadows of a man living under a genetic death sentence, of a son who'd watched his father disappear piece by piece, of a husband who loved me enough to risk giving our child the same curse he carried. "Just a sad movie," I lied. "You know how hormonal I get." He smiled, pulling me against his chest. I fit there perfectly, the way I always had. His heart beat steady and strong beneath my ear. The heart that was genetically programmed to fail him in less than a decade, the same way it had failed his father and his grandfather. "My sensitive girl," he murmured into my hair. "Come to bed. I'll hold you until the sadness passes." I let him lead me to our bedroom, let him pull me into his arms, let him think he was comforting me. All the while, questions churned through my mind with dizzying speed. Did I still need to run? The pregnancy wasn't impossible anymore. But Levi didn't know I knew about the reversal. Would he believe the baby was his when I told him? Or would his first instinct still be suspicion and rage? And even if he believed me, what then? What kind of future could I offer this child? A father who might not remember their name by the time they reached school age? A mother trapped in a marriage built on necessary lies and dangerous secrets? Through the window, I could see Milan's light spreading out beneath us like a blanket of stars. Beautiful and cold and indifferent to the impossible choices I faced. Levi's breathing deepened into sleep, his arm heavy and protective across my waist. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing, my hand pressed against the secret growing inside me. Somewhere in Switzerland, Dr. Pimentel's sister waited at a bed and breakfast I might never need to reach. Somewhere in this apartment, a folder of medical records contained truths that changed everything I thought I knew. Somewhere in my future, a child would be born who might inherit their father's curse, or might be spared, or might never have the chance to find out if I made the wrong choice. I had 12 weeks' worth of plans to escape a danger that might not exist. But I had no plan at all for loving a man who'd lied to protect both of us, who carried death in his DNA, who'd given me the child I'd always wanted, while hiding the cost it might demand. The countdown was still ticking. But now I didn't know what it was counting down to. Escape, revelation, or something far more complicated than either. Dawn was hours away, but I knew I wouldn't sleep. There were too many questions, too many secrets, too many possible futures spreading out before me like roads I couldn't see the end of. All I could do was keep walking forward and hope I chose the right direction. The next 2 weeks existed in a state of surreal suspension. I moved through our life together, Levi's and mine, as though watching myself from outside my body. I smiled at his jokes, accepted his gifts, made love to him in our bed while the truth sat between us like a third presence, invisible but impossible to ignore. He knew something was different. I could see it in the way he watched me when he thought I wasn't looking, the slight furrow between his brows that appeared more frequently. But Levi Franco hadn't built his empire by confronting problems head-on. He was a strategist, a man who observed and calculated before making his move. So we circled each other in an elaborate dance of unspoken knowledge, both waiting for the other to break first. I continued my appointments with Dr. Cohen, maintaining the fiction of headache treatments while actually receiving prenatal care. 14 weeks now. The morning sickness had finally eased, replaced by an energy that felt almost manic. My body was preparing to grow this child, regardless of the chaos surrounding its conception. "You need to make a decision soon," Dr. Cohen said during my 5th visit, her hand gentle on my shoulder. "In another few weeks, you'll start showing in a way you can't hide with loose clothing. If you're going to tell him or if you're going to leave, the window is closing." I knew she was right, but knowing and acting were separated by a chasm of fear I couldn't seem to cross. That night, Levi came home with roses, 24 white ones, my favorite. His face held an expression I couldn't quite read, something between determination and vulnerability. "Put on something nice," he said, kissing my forehead. "We're going out." "Where?" "You'll see." An hour later, we were seated at Da Vittorio, one of Milan's most exclusive restaurants. The kind of place where reservations required months of advance notice, unless your name was Franco, and maitre d's fell over themselves to accommodate you. Levi had requested a private room overlooking the gardens. Candles flickered on the table between us, casting shadows across his face that made him look simultaneously younger and older than his 33 years. "You're trying to seduce me," I said, attempting lightness. "We're already married. The seduction happened 3 years ago." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe I'm trying to remind you why you said yes." The comment landed strangely, carrying weight I wasn't sure how to interpret. "I remember perfectly well why I said yes. You were charming and persistent, and you made me feel like the most important person in the world. And now? Now?" I met his gaze across the table. "Now you still do. When you're not being mysterious and overprotective and treating me like I might break. You seem fragile lately." His fingers traced patterns on the tablecloth, a rare, nervous gesture. "Like you're carrying something heavy that you won't let me help with." My heart stuttered. Did he know? Had he somehow discovered the pregnancy? "Just stress," I said carefully. "These headaches have been—" "Mara." He cut me off gently. "I know the headaches aren't real." The blood drained from my face. "What?" "I know you're not seeing a headache specialist." Dante checked. He held up a hand before I could speak. "Not because I don't trust you, because I was worried. You've been different for weeks now, distant, distracted. And when the woman you love starts keeping secrets, you notice. I should have been angry about the invasion of privacy, about Dante reporting back to him, but all I felt was a strange kind of relief that we were finally being honest." "Then you know I'm seeing Dr. Cohen." "I know you're seeing an obstetrician." His voice was carefully controlled. "What I don't know is why you felt you needed to hide it from me." The waiter appeared with our first course, and we sat in loaded silence until he retreated. I stared at the beautifully plated food, my appetite completely gone. "How long have you known?" I finally asked. 2 days. Dante made some calls." Levi leaned forward, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "Mara, if you're pregnant, if we're going to have a child, why wouldn't you tell me? This is everything we've wanted. Everything I've wanted." The irony of his words, "everything I've wanted," struck me like a physical blow. Because he had wanted it enough to reverse the vasectomy I'd only discovered through accident and deception. "I found your medical records," I said quietly, "in the safe behind the Caravaggio. The vasectomy from 2022. The reversal from 2023. Your mother's letter." Something flickered across Levi's face. Shock, followed by what looked like pain. He sat back in his chair, his hand running through his hair in a gesture of frustration I'd rarely seen from him. "How long have you known?" "About 3 weeks. Since the first ultrasound, actually. The doctor showed me records of the vasectomy and told me the pregnancy was impossible. That you were sterile." She told me to run because she thought—" My voice broke. "She thought I'd been unfaithful, that you'd kill me when you found out." Madonna Santa. Levi's face went white. "You thought I would hurt you, that I would believe—" He stopped, closing his eyes. When he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "And you've been living with that fear for 3 weeks, thinking I would accuse you of betrayal, that I would harm you or our child?" What was I supposed to think? I didn't know about the reversal. All I knew was that the medical record said you couldn't have children, and I was pregnant, and you'd never told me about any of it. "So you were planning to leave me?" It wasn't a question. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Levi stood abruptly, moving to the window overlooking the garden. His shoulders were rigid, his hands braced against the windowsill. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion I'd never heard from him. "My father died when I was 15. Did you know that? I found the obituary, the dementia. Hereditary early-onset dementia." He turned to face me. "It runs in the male line of my family. My grandfather had it. My father had it. There's a 70% chance I'll develop it too. Probably in my early 40s. The clinical way he delivered the information, as though discussing weather patterns rather than his own death sentence, made it somehow worse. "That's why you had the vasectomy," I said. "You didn't want to pass it on." I watched my father disappear piece by piece. Watched him forget my mother's name, forget who I was, forget everything that made him the man he'd been. By the end, he didn't even know he was dying. Levi's voice cracked. "I swore I would never do that to a child. That I would never create a life just to watch it potentially suffer the same fate. Then why reverse it? Why risk having a child if you felt that strongly?" He crossed back to the table, kneeling beside my chair so we were eye level. His hands found mine, holding them with a desperate gentleness. "Because I met you. Because you made me believe that some risks are worth taking. Because when you told me you wanted children, wanted a family, I couldn't bear the thought of denying you that dream." His thumb traced circles on my palm. "I had the reversal 6 months before I proposed. Dr. Moretti said the chances of the gene being passed on could be tested for, that there were options, that medical science might find answers before any child of mine reached the age where symptoms appear. You should have told me. I know. God, Mara, I know. But I was terrified." His eyes held mine, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. "Terrified that if you knew about the dementia you wouldn't marry me. That you'd see me as damaged goods, as a bad investment. That you'd leave before I had the chance to love you the way I needed to. So you lied instead. I omitted. I justified it as protecting you from worry. I told myself that if the disease never manifested, you'd never need to know. And if it did—" He swallowed hard. "If it did, at least I'd have had years of you looking at me like I was whole." Anger and compassion warred inside me. I understood his fear. How could I not, when I'd spent 3 weeks living in terror of my own? But understanding didn't erase the hurt of deception. "I spent 3 weeks thinking I was going to die," I said, my voice shaking. 3 weeks planning to escape, to run to Switzerland, to raise our baby alone because I thought you'd never believe it was yours. 3 weeks of fear so consuming that I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything except survival. Levi's face crumpled. "I'm so sorry. Mara, I'm so sorry. If I had known, if I had any idea." "That's the point, Levi. You didn't know because we've both been keeping secrets. Because instead of trusting each other with the truth, we each decided we knew better." I placed his hand against my abdomen, where our child was growing. "This baby deserves better, deserves parents who can be honest with each other, even when it's terrifying." He went very still, his palm warm through the fabric of my dress. "You're really pregnant. It's real. 14 weeks, due in late September. Our child." His voice was filled with wonder and something that sounded like fear. "Our child who might inherit." "We don't know that yet, and even if they do, we'll face it together. But only if we stop lying to each other. No more secrets, Levi. No more protection through omission. If we're going to do this, raise this child, build a real marriage, it has to be based on truth." He nodded, his forehead resting against our joined hands on my stomach. "No more secrets," he promised. "Starting now." We sat like that for a long moment, the expensive meal forgotten, the elegant restaurant fading into background noise. Just a man and a woman and the child between them. Finally being honest. "I need you to know something," Levi said eventually, his voice muffled against my dress. "When Dante told me you were seeing an obstetrician, my first thought wasn't suspicion or anger. It was joy. Pure, absolute joy that we were going to have a family. I never doubted for a second that the child was mine. Even knowing the vasectomy had happened, I knew about the reversal, remember? I knew it was possible. And more than that," he lifted his head to look at me. "I know you, Mara. Know your heart. You're not capable of the kind of deception betrayal would require. The thought never even crossed my mind." Something in my chest loosened at his words, a knot I'd been carrying for weeks finally beginning to unravel. "So, where do we go from here?" I asked. Levi stood, pulling me to my feet and into his arms. "We go home. We tell my mother she's going to be a grandmother. We start preparing for this baby together. And we figure out, day by day, how to be the kind of parents this child deserves. Even if the dementia, even then." His arms tightened around me. "We'll face whatever comes together. And who knows? Maybe by the time I'm 45, they'll have treatments. Maybe our child will never have to watch me disappear the way I watched my father. But if they do," his voice broke, "if they do, at least they'll have you. At least they'll know they were wanted, loved, chosen." I pulled back to look at his face, seeing the fear and hope and love written there with heartbreaking clarity. "We should go home," I agreed. "We have a lot to plan." As we left the restaurant, Levi's hand protective at my lower back, I felt the weight of the past 3 weeks beginning to lift. There would be more challenges ahead. Difficult conversations, genetic testing, the constant shadow of hereditary illness hanging over our future. But we would face them together, in truth rather than deception. The countdown had ended, not in escape or tragedy, but in something far more unexpected. Honest understanding, tentative forgiveness, and the fragile beginning of a real partnership built on vulnerability rather than secrets. Our child, growing safe inside me, deserved nothing less. 7 months had transformed everything and nothing simultaneously. My body had blossomed with pregnancy in ways that still surprised me when I caught my reflection. The pronounced curve of my belly, the fullness in my face, the way I moved with the careful deliberateness of someone carrying precious cargo. Our daughter, the ultrasounds had revealed at 20 weeks. Levi had wept when we learned the sex, his hand trembling against the screen as he traced the outline of her tiny form. We'd named her Sophia. It meant wisdom in Italian, a quality we both hoped she'd inherit along with whatever else our combined genetics would bestow upon her. The genetic testing had come back 2 weeks after our confession dinner at Da Vittorio. Levi had sat rigid in the specialist's office while Dr. Moretti explained the results in careful clinical terms. Our daughter had not inherited the mutation. She would not develop early-onset dementia. She would not face the fate that had claimed her grandfather and threatened her father. I'd expected Levi to show relief, maybe even joy. Instead, he'd gone very quiet, his face a mask I'd learned to recognize as a desperate attempt to hold emotion in check. It wasn't until we were back in the car, privacy partition raised between us and the driver, that he'd broken down completely. "She's free," he'd whispered against my shoulder, his tears soaking through my dress. "Our girl is free." But the same test that had freed our daughter had confirmed Levi's fate. The mutation was present, active, waiting. Dr. Moretti estimated he had perhaps 8 years before symptoms would begin manifesting. 8 years of wholeness before the gradual erosion of self would commence. 8 years felt simultaneously like forever and not nearly enough time. We'd moved his mother, Rosa, from Sicily to Milan shortly after. She'd been overjoyed about the pregnancy, though her joy was tempered by the same knowledge we all carried now, that she would watch her son disappear the same way she'd watched her husband vanish. But Rosa Franco was made of steel wrapped in silk, and she threw herself into grandmother preparations with an intensity that sometimes overwhelmed me. "This baby will know she is loved," Rosa had declared, arranging the nursery for the 3rd time. "She will have memories of her father that she can keep forever, even when he cannot keep them himself." The nursery had become her domain, a confection of soft yellows and whites with hand-painted murals of Italian gardens that Rosa had commissioned from an artist she'd flown in from Florence. Levi would sit in the rocking chair for hours, his hands resting on the arms, his eyes distant, as he imagined futures he might not remember being part of. I was sitting in that same rocking chair now, my hands cradling my enormous belly, when Levi found me. He'd been in meetings all day. The legitimate business he'd been building alongside his less legitimate empire, creating something Sophia could inherit without shame. "She's active today," I said, as he knelt beside the chair, his hand immediately finding the spot where our daughter was doing what felt like gymnastics. A tiny foot pressed against his palm, and his face lit with the wonder that appeared every time he felt her move. "Strong," he said, his thumb stroking the spot. "Like her mother, or stubborn like her father." He smiled, but I could see the shadows behind it. "I met with the lawyers today. The trusts are all established. Everything will be in your name, with Rosa as backup executor. When the time comes—" "Levi, don't." "When the time comes," he continued firmly, "you'll have full control. No one can touch what I've built for you and Sophia. It's all protected, all legitimate. She'll never want for anything." I pulled his hand from my belly to my lips, kissing his palm. "She'll want her father. She'll have him for as long as possible. Dr. Moretti thinks we have 8 years. 8 years of me being fully present. I intend to make every moment count." Movement near the nursery door caught my attention. Rosa stood there, her expression soft with a sadness that made her look suddenly old. "Levi, you have a visitor. He says it's urgent." Levi's expression hardened instantly, the vulnerable father disappearing behind the mask of the businessman. "I told Dante no interruptions today. He said you'd want to hear this. Something about irregularities in the Borelli shipment." Levi stood, kissing my forehead. "I'll handle it quickly." "Don't move. I want to feel her kick again when I get back." After he left, Rosa came to sit on the ottoman beside the rocking chair. Her hand joined mine on my belly, a grandmother's touch seeking connection with her granddaughter. "He's preparing for the worst," she said quietly. "Making sure you and Sophia will be protected when he's no longer able to protect you himself. He has 8 years. That's not nothing. It's also not enough. It will never be enough." Rosa's eyes glistened with tears she wouldn't let fall. "But it's what we have, and we will fill those years with so much love that Sophia will carry it with her always." A sharp pain lanced through my abdomen, so sudden and intense that I gasped. Rosa was on her feet immediately, her hand gentle on my shoulder. "Mara? What's wrong?" "I don't know, it just..." Another pain, this one stronger, radiating from my lower back around to the front. Something's not right. Rosa was already moving to the door, calling for someone to get Levi, to call Dr. Cohen, her voice steady, despite the fear I could see in her eyes. Levi appeared within seconds, his meeting apparently forgotten the moment he saw my face. What happened? Pain, I managed between contractions, because that's what they were, I realized with growing terror. But it's too early. I'm only 34 weeks. She's not supposed to come yet. Dr. Cohen arrived at our apartment within 30 minutes, her calm efficiency somewhat undermined by the worry in her eyes as she examined me. You're in preterm labor, she confirmed. I can try to stop it, but given how far along you are and how quickly things are progressing, I think we're better off getting you to the hospital. She's not ready, I said, panic making my voice sharp. It's too early. She needs more time. Levi's hand found mine, squeezing with controlled strength. 34 weeks is viable. Sophia will be fine. You'll both be fine. But I could hear the fear beneath his certainty, could feel the way his hand trembled slightly against mine. The hospital was a blur of activity. They got me into a delivery room, monitors tracking Sophia's heartbeat and my contractions. Dr. Cohen spoke in low tones with the attending obstetrician, words like preterm and monitoring, and possibly need NICU, floating through my consciousness like threats. Levi never left my side. Through the hours of labor that followed, through the pain that made me grip his hand until I thought I might break it, through the moments when fear threatened to swallow me whole, he was there. His voice in my ear, his hand in mine, his presence the only constant in a world that had become nothing but contraction and release, pain and brief reprieve. She's crowning, Dr. Cohen announced, and suddenly there were more people in the room, more equipment, a pediatric team standing by in case our too early daughter needed help breathing. Push, Mara, Dr. Cohen instructed, and I did, bearing down with everything I had, determined to bring this child safely into the world, despite the wrong timing, despite the complications, despite everything that could still go wrong. And then, a cry. Sharp, indignant, perfect. It's a girl, someone said, unnecessarily, and they placed her on my chest. This tiny, wrinkled, absolutely beautiful creature who was screaming her displeasure at being evicted from her warm home 6 weeks ahead of schedule. Sophia, I whispered, my hands cradling her fragile form. Our Sophia. Levi's face was wet with tears, his finger gentle as he stroked her impossibly small hand. When her fingers wrapped around his, the sound he made was half laugh, half sob. She's perfect, he said. Absolutely perfect. The pediatric team was hovering, and I knew they needed to check her, to make sure her early arrival hadn't caused any complications. Reluctantly, I let them take her to the warming table across the room, watching anxiously as they examined every inch of her tiny body. She's small, Dr. Cohen said, appearing at my side, but strong, good muscle tone, breathing well on her own, responsive. I think she's going to be just fine. Relief made me weak. I sank back against the pillows, suddenly aware of how exhausted I was. Levi's hand found mine again, and when I looked at him, I saw something I'd never quite seen before in his face. Not just love or happiness, but a kind of completeness that made him look younger, lighter, as though some burden had been lifted. 8 years, he said softly, his eyes never leaving our daughter as the nurses worked on her. I have 8 years to teach her, to show her, to make sure she knows who I am. 8 years to be her father before we face whatever comes together. I finished. All 3 of us, your mother too. He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, finally my lips. Thank you, he whispered, for staying, for giving me this, for giving us this. I thought about the folder of medical records I'd found 7 months ago, about the 3 weeks of terror and planning to escape, about Dr. Pimentel's sister still waiting at that bed and breakfast in Switzerland for a woman who would never arrive. I thought about the countdown that had ticked away those weeks, the deadline I'd given myself to disappear. I'd never needed to run. The danger I'd feared had been nothing more than incomplete information, a misunderstanding that had nearly cost me everything. "I should be thanking you," I said, "for being honest with me. Finally." "No more secrets," he promised again. "Not about the important things." They brought Sophia back to us, swaddled in hospital blankets, her face peaceful now that the indignity of birth had passed. Levi held her with the careful intensity of a man who knew every moment was precious. Every memory needed to be savored while he could still form them. "Hello, Piccolina," he murmured. "I'm your papa, and I'm going to love you for as long as I can remember how. And when I can't remember anymore, your mama will tell you stories about me, about how much I wanted you, how perfect you are, how you saved us both. I watched them together, this dangerous man cradling this fragile life, both of them impossibly precious to me, and felt something settle in my chest. Not happiness exactly, because how could it be purely happy when we all knew what was coming, but something close to it. Peace, maybe. Acceptance. We had 8 years, maybe more, if medical science caught up to Levi's genetics. Maybe less, if fate decided to be cruel. But we had right now, this moment, this perfect daughter who had brought us together, even as the threat of separation loomed in our future. "She looks like you," Levi said, his finger tracing Sophia's tiny nose. "She has your strength." "She has your stubbornness," I countered. "She's 6 weeks early because she couldn't wait." He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Rosa appeared in the doorway, her eyes bright with tears as she saw her granddaughter for the first time. "Oh," she breathed, crossing to us. "Oh, she's perfect." Levi placed Sophia carefully in his mother's arms, and I watched 3 generations of Franco women connect. Rosa, who had lost her husband to this disease, me who would lose my husband to it, and Sophia, who had been spared, but would still bear the weight of its legacy. "We're going to be okay," I said, speaking to all of them and to myself. "Whatever comes, we're going to face it together." And watching them, my daughter, my husband, my mother-in-law, I almost believed it. The countdown had ended not in escape or tragedy, but in this, a too early baby, a too short future, and the fierce determination to love completely while we could. It would have to be enough. It would have to be everything. Sophia was 2 weeks old when the first real test of our honesty pact arrived. We'd brought her home from the hospital after 4 days of monitoring, her weight stabilizing, her breathing strong. The apartment had transformed into a shrine to new parenthood. Burp cloths draped over every surface, the bassinet beside our bed, the constant white noise of the sound machine that seemed to be the only thing that kept our daughter from expressing her powerful opinions about the world. I was surviving on approximately 3 hours of sleep per 24-hour period. My body still recovering from the birth, my mind foggy with exhaustion and hormones. Levi had taken time away from business to help, and I'd discovered that the most feared man in Milan was absolutely helpless in the face of one tiny infant. "She's crying again," he said unnecessarily, hovering over the bassinet with the expression of someone defusing a bomb. "What does she need?" "The same thing she needed 30 minutes ago. To eat." I reached for her, wincing at the pull of still healing muscles, and settled into the nursing chair Rosa had insisted was essential. Levi watched with fascination as Sophia latched on, her tiny hands flexing against my breast. "It's miraculous," he said softly, "that your body knows exactly what to do." "My body has very strong opinions about everything right now," I replied, adjusting Sophia's position. most of them involving sleep that I'm not getting. He kissed the top of my head. Let me take her after this feeding. You sleep. I'll handle whatever she needs. You can't breastfeed. I can walk with her, rock her, change her. Let you rest for a few hours at least. His hand cupped my cheek. You need to recover, amore mio. You pushed our daughter into the world 6 weeks early. Your body deserves time to heal. I was too exhausted to argue. After Sophia finished feeding, I handed her to Levi and stumbled to our bed, unconscious almost before my head hit the pillow. I woke 4 hours later to voices in the living room, Levi's and another man's, speaking in low, urgent Italian. My still foggy brain took a moment to identify the second voice. Dante. Something was wrong. I pulled on a robe and padded quietly to the bedroom door, opening it just enough to hear clearly. Can't ignore this, boss. The Borelli situation has escalated. They're making moves on the waterfront shipments, cutting into our margins significantly. If we don't respond, they'll see it as weakness. Then we respond through legal channels, file complaints with the Port Authority, document everything. That's not how this works, and you know it. Dante's frustration was evident. The Borellis don't respect paperwork. They respect power, and right now, with you distracted with the baby, they think we're vulnerable. I'm not distracted. I'm focused on what matters. Your family is what matters, Dante agreed. Which is why you need to handle this before it gets worse. Before they start thinking they can push further, maybe even target. He stopped abruptly, but the implication hung in the air. Target us. Target Sophia and me. They wouldn't dare, Levi said, his voice dropping to the dangerous quiet I recognized, the tone that preceded violence. They don't know about Sophia yet. We've kept her birth quiet, like you wanted, but eventually, word will spread. And when the Borellis realize you have a daughter, they'll see her as leverage. Ice flooded my veins. This was the world Levi had tried to protect me from, the reality of his empire that existed in the shadows of our domestic bliss. Men who would see our 2-week-old daughter as a tool, a weakness to exploit. What do you recommend? Levi asked, and I heard the resignation in his voice. The father making way for the businessman who dealt in violence. The usual response, swift, definitive. Send a message that the Franco family is not to be tested. No. The word was flat, final. Find another way. I'm not doing this anymore, Dante. The old methods, the violence. I'm done with it. Boss, I have 8 years, Levi cut him off. 8 years before this disease starts eating my brain. 8 years to be a father to my daughter, a husband to my wife. I will not spend that time continuing the cycle of violence that killed my father early and will kill me early too. I will not have Sophia growing up with a father who has blood on his hands, even if she's too young to understand it now. Then what do you propose? The Borellis aren't going to back down because you've had an attack of conscience. I propose we do what I've been working toward for the past year. We transition. Sell off the problematic assets. Keep only the legitimate businesses. The Borellis can have the waterfront if they want it. We'll focus on the real estate developments, the construction contracts, the things that won't put my family at risk. Dante was quiet for a long moment. They'll never let you just walk away. You know too much, have too much leverage. They'll see it as betrayal. Then we'll navigate that when it comes. But I'm not responding to this with violence. I can't. Not anymore. I must have made some sound because both men turned toward the bedroom door. Levi's expression when he saw me shifted from determination to concern. How much did you hear? Enough. I walked into the living room, tying my robe more tightly around my still soft midsection. The Borellis are a threat. You want to walk away from that world. Dante thinks that's impossible. Dante had the grace to look uncomfortable at my directness. Mrs. Franco, this is business. You shouldn't worry. Don't. I cut him off. Don't tell me not to worry. This business, as you call it, affects my daughter's safety. I have every right to be part of this conversation. Levi crossed to me, his hands gentle on my shoulders. You should be resting. I've done enough resting. What I need is honesty. You promised no more secrets, remember? I looked between him and Dante. So tell me the truth. How bad is this situation? How real is the threat to Sophia? The men exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, Levi sighed. The Borellis have been pushing boundaries for months. They're ambitious, reckless, willing to cross lines that even in our world are generally respected. Families, children, those have always been off limits. But the new generation doesn't honor the old codes the way their fathers did. So Sophia could be in danger. Not if I handle this correctly. Not if we're smart about the transition. And what does handling it correctly look like? I pressed. Because I heard Dante suggest the usual response. What does that mean? Another exchanged look. Levi's jaw tightened. Historically, it would mean retaliating against their operations, making it clear that pushing us has consequences. Sometimes that involves property damage. Sometimes it's more direct. You mean hurting people, killing people. He didn't deny it. I thought about the folder I'd found months ago, about the man who'd disappeared after being too friendly with a cousin's wife. I thought about the obituaries that never quite explained how certain rivals of the Franco family met their ends. I'd known in an abstract way what Levi was, what he did. But hearing it stated so baldly, in the context of protecting our daughter, made it impossible to maintain the comfortable distance I'd been keeping. And you're saying you won't do that anymore, I said to Levi. That you want to walk away from that world. Yes. Even though it might put us at greater risk in the short term. Even though these people might see it as weakness. Yes. I studied his face, seeing the determination there, the fear beneath it, the love that was willing to risk everything to be the father Sophia deserved. Okay, I said simply. Both men stared at me. Okay? Dante repeated. Just like that? Just like that. I looked at Levi. You promised me honesty. You're being honest. You're telling me you want to transition the business to legitimate operations, that you want to break the cycle of violence. I believe you. So we figure out how to do that safely. Mara, it's not that simple. I know it's not simple, but you have 8 years. We have 8 years. I'm not going to waste that time arguing about whether you should try to be better. I'm going to spend it helping you succeed. I turned to Dante. What do we need to do? To make this transition work without getting killed in the process? Dante looked between us, something like respect dawning in his expression. We'd need to be strategic. Start with the easiest assets to legitimize or sell. Build relationships with law enforcement. Show them we're cooperating. Create enough legitimate revenue streams that losing the illegal ones doesn't cripple us financially. How long would that take? 2 years, maybe 3, to do it safely, but the Borelli situation can't wait that long. Then we handle the Borelli situation differently, I said, an idea forming. What if instead of responding with violence, we respond with information? Give law enforcement everything we have on their illegal operations. Let the courts handle them instead of us. Levi's eyes widened. That's exactly what you said you wanted, I finished. You said you're done with the old methods. This is a new method. Legal, clean, and it removes the threat without putting blood on anyone's hands. The old families would see it as betrayal, Dante warned. Cooperating with law enforcement breaks every code. I'm breaking every code anyway by walking away from the violence, Levi pointed out. At least this way, I'm doing it for the right reasons. To protect my family. To build something Sophia can actually be proud of one day. And from the bedroom, Sophia's cry pierced the air. Hungry again, or wet, or simply wanting the comfort of being held. The sound galvanized all of us. a reminder of what we were really fighting for. "I need to feed her," I said, already moving toward the bedroom. "But this conversation isn't over. We make decisions together now, Levi. All of us. You, me, your mother, even Dante if he's going to be part of this transition. No more keeping me separate from the business side of your life." I could see Levi wrestling with the instinct to protect me, to keep me innocent of the darker aspects of his world. But then he nodded. "Together," he agreed. "We'll figure this out together." As I settled into the nursing chair with Sophia, listening to the men's voices resume their planning in hushed tones, I felt something shift in my understanding of our future. Yes, we only had 8 years of Levi being fully himself. Yes, the threat of his disease loomed like a shadow over everything. Yes, there were still dangerous men who might see our family as vulnerable. But we also had each other. We had honesty, finally, fully. We had this fierce determination to build something better, something Sophia could inherit without shame. And we had right now, this moment, this feeding, this tiny daughter who knew nothing of disease or danger or the complicated world she'd been born into. She only knew warmth, comfort, love. That would have to be enough. That would have to be everything. Through the door, I heard Levi's voice. "Set up a meeting with my lawyer, and with that contact you have in the federal prosecutor's office. It's time to make some deals." Dante's reply was inaudible, but I caught the surprise in his tone. Change was coming. Whether it would save us or destroy us remained to be seen. But at least we would face it together, in truth rather than deception. Sophia's hand wrapped around my finger as she nursed, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so small. I looked down at her perfect face and made a silent promise. We would fight for her. We would protect her. We would build a world where she could grow up safe, knowing her father had chosen her over his empire, had chosen love over violence, had chosen hope over the inheritance of fear. 8 years or 80, we would make them count. The countdown had ended. But our story was just beginning.